My plan was to make a lighter episode this week, since last week got a bit sincere with the age rating thing. But then the Norwegian broadcasting company decided to make a report on the connection between video game addictions and unemployment. Problem was that the report was from the view of an unemployment consultant. Pretty much just pulling out numbers without any real statistics or research behind them. He just generally saw the connection of people being unemployed and playing video games. And I feel like reports like this only further stigmatizes what it is to play video games, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what I wanted to do with this channel. What we got here is a lack of understanding and a general fear for a medium. So since this consultant and journalist decided to give their uneducated opinions, maybe I should give my uneducated opinion too, backed up with some facts. Let me point out right away, you can get addicted to video games. No, don't click away. Wait, hear me out. You can get addicted to video games. Video games is an extremely good dopamine-inducing activity. And what is dopamine? Well, according to Psychology Today, dopamine is a neural transmitter that helps control the brain's reward and pleasure sensors. Dopamine also helps regulate movement and emotional responses. And it enables us not only to see rewards, but to take actions towards them. In other words, dopamine is a substance that is released in your brain that gives you a sense of contempt and reward. When you do an activity that stimulates dopamine, your brain will feel good and happy. Strong narcotics like crystal meth or heroin releases an enormous amount of dopamine to your brain, and a drug addict will reach heights of happiness. But they will also crash down to the lowest low, and the chemicals put in the drugs will make you physically addicted, resulting in withdrawal if you try to stop. So drugs with addictive substances that chemically induces your brain to release a lot of dopamine is a type of addictions we are most afraid of and know most about. And smoking is probably the mildest version of that. But there are other dopamine-inducing drugs that does not necessarily contain addictive substances. Even though that's quite controversial to say, drugs like alcohol or marijuana. Still, we know a lot of people with very hard abuse of these substances. So you're probably wondering why I don't agree with video games addiction and unemployment? Well, because when you're addicted to a dopamine-inducing substance or activity, a lot of research suggests that it's not a disease in itself, but actually more a symptom. Then a symptom of something more deeper psychologically or socially that you're trying to cover up. Bruce K. Alexander is a psychiatrist and a researcher of addiction, and he made the famous Rat Park experiment in the 1970s. He says, "When I talk to addicted people, whether they're addicted to alcohol, drugs, gambling, internet use, sex, or anything else, I encounter human beings who really do not have a viable social or cultural life. They use their addiction as a way of coping with their dislocation, as an escape, a painkiller, or a substitute for a full life." In other words, a lot of people addicted to dopamine-inducing activities are self-medicating because of other psychological or social problems. You can ask an alcoholic to stop drinking, but if you don't figure out why he started drinking in the first place, he will most likely fall back. Note that I said dopamine-inducing activities and not video games, because there's a lot of dopamine-inducing activities. Do you know what else is dopamine-inducing? Well, social media, sex, pornography, gambling, training, shopping, sports, extreme sports, just generally performing well at work. When you made a great deal, giving birth is very dopamine-infusing, and even eating releases dopamine in your brain, especially if what you're eating contains sugar. It's virtually any activity that makes you feel good, and all of these activities contain some risk of addiction. That's why we got a lot of phrases like workaholic, shopaholic, or sex addicts. Medical News Today writes, "Addiction does not only include physical things that we consume, such as drugs or alcohol, but it may include virtually anything, such abstract things as gambling to seamlessly harmless products, such as chocolates. In other words, addiction may refer to a substance dependence or behavioral addiction." In all activities where you're performing well or winning, your brain will reward you by dosing you with dopamine. It's your brain literally patting you on the back saying, "Good job, buddy." And this is a very primitive function which motivates us to eat, have sex, and generally have fun. In games, the entire point is to win and accomplish something. And that's why it's a very dopamine-inducing experience. This counts just as much for if you're playing Candy Crush or if you're playing Destiny or Call of Duty. But if you're not doing this to cover up some lingering psychological or social problems, I would insist that doing dopamine-inducing activities is actually really good for you, like eating and having sex. It all helps to make your days a lot brighter and happy. So let's get back to this report on unemployment and video games. The report suggests that a lot of people are unemployed because they play a lot of video games. And I really don't think that's the case. Could it be that they're playing a lot of games because they're unemployed and not the other way around? If you motivate them to get a job and fill their life with something meaningful, they will automatically be motivated to play less games. And that doesn't mean that games is necessarily a negative part of their lives. If someone is playing a lot of video games and socially closing themselves off from society, there's probably a psychological or a social problem under there that needs to be dealt with first, before we take away their controller. In the case of this report, most of the people have the same problem. They're unemployed. And if that's not the case, they might be depressed, have anxiety, be fed up with school, in grief, heartbroken, or one of the 100 other problems that you can have socially today. To be honest with you, I would rather people self-medicate with video games than other illegal drugs, because that's a viable option. But with that said, there are a few games that are designed to reward you regularly, and these games are designed to be more addictive than others. I'm looking at you, World of Warcraft, or other MMO games, where social progression is a big part of it. So if you're prone to addiction, you should probably stay away from these types of games. But even in these cases, I still believe that this is more a symptom than an actual disease. So yes, you can get addicted to video games, just like you can get addicted to any other dopamine-inducing activity like drinking alcohol, having sex, doing sport or extreme sports, and even shopping. But what's important to remember, that not all people who shop a lot are shopaholics. And definitely not all people who play video games are addicted to video games. We just enjoy it very much. Luckily, the entire report was more or less debunked with a radio interview that I think nobody heard, where a specialist in game addiction gave his thoughts and opinion on a matter. And then the radio host asked him something quite interesting. He asked him what he thought parents should do if they think their kids are addicted to video games. And his response was very good. Parents should educate themselves on video games and figure out how it benefits their kids and why they are spending so much time playing them. That's pretty much what I said last week. If you have someone close to you who suffers from video game addiction, it's absolutely a problem that has to be treated. But might I encourage you to look past the addiction, because there might be something social, psychological that you have to deal with first, before you deal with his addiction. And when you meet someone like us who plays a lot of video games, don't automatically assume that we got a problem. We just really like video games. I'll put a video here on addiction that I think you should see. It's a very good video. We'll continue discussing down in the comment section. Remember to give this video a little thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and I guess I'll talk to you later.